Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi folks, and welcome to this week's podcast. On this week's podcast, we're going to take a dive into emotions and the whole array of emotions that we feel in order to understand why we don't allow ourselves feel some of them. And there's this beautiful song that I often listen to, and one of the lines in it, she says, at times in life, we can feel like our emotions are inside, threatening the very life they belong to. And that's when we're feeling anxiety, grief, all of these things. But to feel and be truly alive, we need to be able to feel and release all of our emotions, not to swan dive into coping mechanisms every time a large emotional wave hits us. And that's what often happens. And what happens then is that keeps them emotions stuck within our emotional body because we're stuffing them down, we're numbing them out, we're not allowing ourselves to feel them and just release them. And often that's because because we've never learned the tools to process our emotions. We're taught from a very young age, we're conditioned into what's okay to feel, how it's okay to show up, how we're supposed to be. And depending on our conditioning, that can be very different from men as opposed to women. And the lack of allowing ourselves to feel our emotions shows up across our lives in what we allow ourselves do, how we allow ourselves be, how we show up in every single relationship that we're in. And learning to be okay with how we're feeling and not telling ourselves, I shouldn't be feeling that way, I shouldn't be reacting that way. Allowing ourselves to look at the emotion, ask what it is, allowing ourselves to feel it, dialing down the voice of the ego that's in there telling you, judging you for feeling a particular way and telling you that it's not okay, that it doesn't fit into the paradigm of your identity or your self-image, or you cannot show up that way. Learning to dial down that voice and allow ourselves to feel and release our own emotions is directly and profoundly connected to not only our emotional health and well-being, but our physical health and well-being. We all know that chronic stress comes from things that are trapped within our being, trapped within our body, and that is our emotions. All the emotions, grief, pain, playing small, being small, all the things that are wired into our identity, it's holding them down and keeping them in and doing the people pleasing, the showing up how we believe the world should see us. It's all of those things that keep our true self stuff down and leave us feeling imposter syndrome, procrastination, perfectionism. All of those things show up then as coping mechanisms. So just for a moment, folks, imagine that your internal world, that beautiful land inside, is a vast, stunning body of water. And your emotions are the current that runs through it. They're the energy that runs through it. And when we don't allow ourselves to feel our emotions, that water stops flowing. That water stops moving. And the current cannot move through our system, which means eventually our beautiful system is flooded. And that's when we experience the outpourings. That's when we experience the behaviours we don't feel in control of, like anxiety, chronic stress, physical ailments. All of these things show up then as the body trying to cope with the suppressed emotions because we're not allowing them just move through our system. And for a lot of us, we realised a long time ago that unfelt feelings don't just go away. And I think that shows up hugely in grief, in the experience of grief. When we're repressing and suppressing grief, depression often kicks in. Anxiety kicks in, and that is down to us repressing what we're truly feeling, which underneath it all is sadness. And that sadness wants to pass, it wants to leave. But what can often happen is we live there in another way. We live there through depression, we live there through anxiety. And when the energy of these emotions lingers within our body, it has a massive negative impact on how we're showing up every day. I've been reading a lot because I'm studying at the moment to write my own book. Happiness is an inside job, folks, getting a plug in there. But one of the readers or the writers that I'm back reading a lot of their work because I do love it is Eckhart Tolle. And he calls the ego the pain body. And there's many different names for it. And he describes it as the pain body is the accumulation of unresolved emotions from the difficult experience from our past, both individually and as a collective. And he goes on to say, like an unwelcome guest at a party, the pain body / the ego can arrive in at the slightest provocation and completely take over how we are thinking, how we are acting, and how we are feeling. And one of the scenarios he describes that I've talked to you before about is road rage. Road rage shows us hugely, I think, where our ego jumps into the driving seat literally and sits behind the wheel. Our emotions can often be triggered when we're out driving, because to drive, 90% of driving is observation of other people. It's trusting other people. It's trusting they won't cut you off, they won't cause an accident, they won't get in your way or do something ridiculously stupid. It's a huge amount of trust. And when someone does do those things that are against our paradigm of rules, our ego can dive out, our rage can come forward, and we can wish horrendous things, we can say horrendous things, and that's us jumping straight into the ego body. And that's because we feel out of control within our external world. And what that actually reflects for us is how out of control or powerless we feel within our internal world. And it's always going back within and looking at what we actually feel out of control of within and how that's showing up within our lives. Our first step in allowing ourselves literally feel our own feelings is awareness of them showing up in the first place. We live so much from the past and from things that have happened in our past, and we're projecting that onto the future. We rarely allow ourselves to be present. And the presence and allowing ourselves to be present is the only point in time that we can control. And it's also the only point in time that we can find that peace and find that stillness where we can eject the ego, eject all that negativity, and just sit and be with ourselves and feel into what is going on in the body, what sensations are coming up, what emotions you're feeling. And to live from that space is literally cutting out what the mind is thinking and what the mind is telling you, and feeling into the body, feeling into your heart, feeling into your physical system, and understanding what it is that's shown up in your body. And the next question that you're asking after that, when you have that awareness of what it is, be it anger, rage, sadness, upset, jealousy, or joy, any of those emotions, when we have the awareness of what that emotion is, it's asking what it is that emotion is telling you. Our emotions are always speaking to us. They're always telling us something, but our mind puts a picture onto what that emotion is telling us. It pulls from our past, decides what that emotion means, and then if it's negative, it stuffs it down, represses it, and we're left wondering why we have so much chaos going on inside. So first, allowing ourselves to feel into our body, feel what the emotions are, feel the sensations, and there's so many practices out there to do that within, be it meditation, yoga, walking, just sitting and grounding, being outside, being outdoors, being around loved ones. All of these things help us start to work with our own emotional being, our own emotional body. Because one of the biggest challenges that we face today as humans, as beings, is the absolute avoidance and fear of deeply feeling our own feelings. And this has us completely disconnected from our emotional and spiritual being. And the reason we don't want to often feel these feelings is because these are outside the paradigm of our ego, they're outside the identity, the self-image, or to feel these feelings, to feel, say, sadness or pain or frustration, means we have to look at what we're frustrated at, be it in our relationships, in our work life, and from there, we have to make changes. Because when we recognize, I'm really, really frustrated, okay, where's that frustration residing in the body? What is it I am frustrated about? I'm really frustrated in that job. I don't feel I gain any value, or I'm just there for money, or whatever it is. These are just examples, folks. Whatever it is, when we dive into that and start looking at why we're feeling the way we're feeling, it often means we have to make changes. And changes for us as beings are scary. And the closer the changes are to home, be it within our core relationships, our loved ones, our financial security, our home, changes about our children, how we're being and showing up with them, all of these things, or whether we're showing up as a people pleaser and need to be liked, all of these things, the moment we recognize them, it is also the recognition that we need to make changes. And that's the part we don't like. That's the piece that our ego does not like. Our ego wants to keep us within our comfort zone, doing the same things every day, keeping us safe and keeping us within a paradigm. But what that leaves us feeling is the split self, the conflict between how you're actually feeling and what you're showing the world you're feeling. It creates a split, a divide inside. And as I've learned from my own experiences, and we all know, you will not win a battle with yourself. It just leads you to those same emotions, feeling stuck, feeling anxious, and feeling stressed. And the main reason we really refuse to look within is because we are so scared we lack the tools to make the changes, or we are undeserving of the changes that we really, really desire. And it's only in looking at these things, looking at our inner lack, looking at our conditioning, looking at how we're showing up in the world, that leads us back to the place that we want to be, feeling that wholeness, feeling that connectedness, releasing out the pain from the past and what that has taught you that you should be. Releasing out all of that negativity, all those repressed emotions that are keeping you feeling like you're trapped in a prison of smallness, trapped in a prison of being consumed or overtaken by these emotions. And it's the fear of being overtaken by them. Like, we all know that feeling of, if I cry, I won't stop. That absolute terror of, if I allow that up, it will never stop releasing. It'll take me down into this dark hole of deep depression. And what we don't see, the reality of what's right in front of us, is often it's the not feeling of these feelings and repressing them with coping mechanisms that keeps us living there, that keeps us in them. It's in the release and letting whatever sadness, whatever pain, whatever lack up and out, taking it out of the shadows, feeling it, dealing with it and healing with it, that allows us to move on and find our true self underneath what the false self, the ego, is telling us. And it's recognizing that it is only conditioning and only programming from our childhood that has us in the first place labeling our emotions and our sensations as being either good or bad. It's our conditioning and our brain, our mind, that is constantly labeling emotions. We don't allow ourselves, if we feel into the body, we have a choice to choose what they are, to decide what they are. As we know, folks, anxiety and excitement feel the exact same within our body. You will get the same sensations from excitement within your stomach, that butterfly feeling, that tingly feeling, all of that. Anxiety feels the same, but it's our brain that labels it either one, and it has a tendency to label it as anxiety as opposed to excitement. And then what that causes is that the brain tells us, oh, that's anxiety. We move straight into either coping mechanisms or avoidance of these situations that create these feelings in the first place. When it is just sitting with yourself and allowing yourself to feel into these emotions, recognizing that there's no good or bad within them. They are just energy in motion. And it's only in the repressing of these emotions that they can't flow and they remain stuck in our system, triggering patterns of behaviour that we're then wondering why we feel out of control of. Why am I driving to the shops every day to buy beer, smokes, alcohol, or why am I scrolling for 4 hours through my phone trying to numb out, or watching 10 episodes of, I don't know, Disney or whatever it is? We then try to numb out to avoid being triggered by the patterns that suppressing our emotions has created. And we're caught on a hamster wheel when, like, we have within us the absolute supreme intellect and the tools within to work with the emotions. It's the conditioning and the mind that stop us doing it. And because we live from our minds rather than our hearts, we listen to everything it says. We allow it to dictate or tell us what a particular emotion means, rather than allowing ourselves to feel into it, ground ourselves, and be okay and recognize that they are just sensations. They are just feelings. Yes, they may feel a bit uncomfortable or a large bit uncomfortable, but that too will pass. And if we want to make those big changes in our lives, it is facing those emotions that we've been conditioned not to feel. Those emotions we don't allow ourselves to feel, because it's in the suppression of them that we're also suppressing desire, pleasure, all joy, all those beautiful things. Because when we feel joy, the conditioned mind comes in and says, oh, that's going to be snatched away. Don't let yourself feel that. No, that'll be taken away. That joy will be stolen. And we don't even allow ourselves feel that, because we're stuck in the fear and the lack that's trapped in our body within these emotions. Our amazing emotional body is always trying to do the work for us. We have such a phenomenal capacity to heal ourselves. Most of even the drugs that the pharmaceutical companies create for ailments, illnesses and diseases within our body, mimic the chemicals that we already have within ourselves. We have an innate, profound capacity to actually heal ourselves. And even our emotional body is always trying to do that for us. Like, a small example is, do you ever find yourself absolutely drawn to a particular movie, one you've seen before, possibly many times, but you're drawn back to that movie in that moment, and you need to watch that particular one. And when you do watch it, you find, maybe you're in floods of tears, maybe you're feeling the innocence and joy of life, whatever it is, but you're really, really feeling heightened emotions in watching that. Now, it can tend to be sadness, as I say, you can tend to be in a flood of tears, but that's your emotional body recognizing you need a release. It cannot figure, or you won't allow it any other way of doing it. So it'll direct you towards the movie. And then we're going, yeah, that movie was very sad. When really all it's doing is triggering a sadness that's within us, that we're relating to within the movie. And it's a point of release for the emotional body. Like, it has a profound way of healing. And all we need to do is listen. All we need to do is build that awareness of our own emotional body that has been conditioned out of us for so long. Asking those questions, what is it I'm feeling in this moment, and allowing yourself to feel it. I find journaling absolutely powerful. I vomit my emotions all over a journal constantly because it's a release for me. I use this podcast to share in ways a lot of what has come up in my life, or what a lot of possibly I'm not allowing myself to feel, or different things that have showed up in my past. These are the channels, my ways of doing these things. I'll sit and I'll watch a Disney, cry my eyeballs out, and just get those releases. I'll ground, I'll go out and just take my shoes and socks off, just lie and look up at the clouds. Just look at the sky, look at the clouds, and allow myself that point of stillness, that point of quiet. Now, normally Sasha's with me, the dog, so it doesn't stay quiet for long. But these are the tools and the things I do. But first, it is the awareness. And second, it's in the allowance of allowing yourself to feel those things and knowing that they will pass as soon as you allow yourself to release them. And if you want any more tips, tools and tips on this, guys, do feel free to email, text me, whatever it is, so you can begin to walk through some of the emotions that you've stuffed down, and yet start feeling that wholeness, creating that calm, that peace within, and bringing you back to opening yourself up to everything that life does have to offer and everything that's waiting out there for you. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about, or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews, because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye bye.